Thank you for joining us this evening for the FuturePedsRes DO webinar for the 2023 match cycle. If you're here with us for the first time, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you get a lot out of this event tonight. And if you were with us for the kickoff event on Monday, thank you so much for joining us again. And we hope everybody keeps attending these events. We have a lot more of excellent webinars coming up in this season. My name is Amy Lorber. My pronouns are she, her, and I am currently a fourth-year medical student at Western Michigan University School of Medicine in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I am serving as one of the co-directors of FuturePedsRes this year. Our other co-director is Chiamaka Nwachukwu, and she is a Nigerian international medical graduate from the University of Lagos and a junior clinical fellow at King's College of London. And she is also serving as one of our co-directors for FuturePedsRes this year. And she may be able to join us partway through the event, so we'll keep an eye out. As always, we would like to highlight our founders for FuturePedsRes, who are now second-year pediatric interns, so people are moving on up, achieving great things. Their names are Mikola Neelakantan and Nick Heitkamp. And we would also like to acknowledge the Association of Pediatric Program Directors. They are our huge partners in this and essentially the reason that we can provide these webinars. So we'd like to acknowledge Dr. John Frona. He's the department chair at CAMC West Virginia in the Charleston division. He's also our sort of go-between for the APPD. So we've been very grateful to him throughout this process. And we'd also like to acknowledge Colleen Hughes, the Associate Executive Director with the APPD, who's also been helping us make these webinars a reality. So we are really excited to have you here with us. We hope that the information today is helpful. And I'd also like to highlight that we have April Buchanan here with us. She is the president of COMLEX. That is the, I'm trying to remember the acronym, and I will let her tell you about it herself.
Great, no problem at all. So it's the Council on Medical Student Education in Pediatrics. And so at your medical schools, these are usually the clerkship director, some of the directors for post-clerkship. You may have pediatric educators that are involved in your preclinical education. So we're part of the undergraduate medical education community. And then many of these folks in COMLEX serve as pediatric advisors. So remember to use those individuals as you go through this match process this year. And we are happy to partner as well with APPD and FuturePedsRes. So thanks for having us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's great to be aware of COMLEX. I had just found out that our entire third-year program director here at Western Michigan is part of your group. So we love it. It's now our pleasure to introduce all of you to our Assistant Director for Equity of DO applicants here at FuturePedsRes. This is Kirthi Machareddy. Kirthi is a fourth-year osteopathic medical student at Edward Via College of Osteopathic Medicine, and she's going to take it from here.
All right, thank you, Amy, for that wonderful intro, and thank you all again for tuning in tonight. Next slide, please. All right, this is also our DO webinar team, Sabina and Zach. So now let's delve into our objectives. So our objectives for the Peds Match 2023 webinar series, and in particular for tonight's DO session, are to provide DO resident applicants with #1, tools towards empowering themselves as strong applicants for Match 2023 residency cycle. #2, advice on finding mentors and sponsors to help navigate the virtual season. And #3, recommendations on how to avoid major pitfalls. Next slide. Oh, wait, can we go back? Sorry. Okay, sorry. But tonight's event will be a panelist discussion, and we will proceed with a prepared Q&A, followed by opening the floor to any remaining questions you may have. We will be joined by all of our webinar attendings here on Zoom, as well as actively engaging via Med Twitter and live tweets throughout tonight's session. Tell your friends and colleagues to log on if they haven't already done so, and use the hashtag FPRWebinar to make sure we see your tweets. If you have any questions here on Zoom, feel free to put them in the chat for everyone to see. If not, you can message them separately to Amy. And now the moment you've all been waiting for. On behalf of FuturePedsRes, I'd like to give a warm welcome to all our esteemed panelists for tonight. So Dr. Laura Bodie is a clinical associate professor of pediatrics at Oklahoma State University Center for Health Science and program director of the Osteopathic Medical Education Consortium of Oklahoma Pediatrics Residency. And then we have Dr. Joanna Lewis. She is the Pediatric Residency Program Director at Advocate Children's Hospital in Park Ridge, Illinois. In her clinical practice, she sees children in general pediatrics and community health. And then we also have Dr. Winters. Dr. Winters is the Pediatric Residency Program Director at Atlantic Health Gorham Children's Hospital. In his clinic practice, he sees children in general pediatrics and community health. So thank you all for being here tonight. And without further ado, let's get started with our question portion of tonight's webinar. All right, so this first question is going to go to Dr. Winters. How do we identify programs that are DO friendly?
Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me.
Hi, we heard you for a second. It's Joanna, but then you disappeared.
Some background noise.
Now we see your face. Hi.
Can you see me now?
Yeah.
Hear you now. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry, everyone. It has been like the day of no days, but I am here. All right. Haha. How do we pick a DO-friendly program? I mean, I think this is a question that remains such a very common question, but it's also a question that can be very elusive. I mean, first and foremost, the things that I've done being a DO as well as undergoing this process is on both ends of the spectrum. So both as a program director, but also as a former applicant. There were several things I looked forward to. Not only did I look for programs that had DOs, whether they were in the residency or on faculty, but even if they didn't have those things, I looked for evidence that you understood about osteopathic medicine. So whether that was being able to have information on their, whether it was their website or mailers or any information that talked about my boards, so COMLEX, talked about being active or encouraging activity within the American Osteopathic Association, American College of Osteopathic Pediatricians, whether that was encouraging and talking about how I can continue on my training in osteopathic manipulative medicine. I'm a firm believer that even if you don't decide to practice on them in your as you move forward, even though I do, it doesn't necessarily make you a bad DO. I think, but having that understanding and the comfort and as well as the respect of osteopathic principles and practice is how we were taught is so hugely important. So having a program that really wants you to either further along that training or incorporating those principles and practice into your training as a pediatrician is so important. So having that be represented, whether it is within the mission and aims or whether that's in part of the curriculum, however that program may be able to specify and show an interest in who you are as a healthcare provider, as a physician, I think is huge. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Dr. Winters. If anyone else has anything to say, feel free to jump in too. All right, we can move on to our second question. So this question is for Dr. Bodie. How many programs should DOs apply to this cycle? And what factors should an applicant consider when creating their ERAS list?
Sure. So AAMC has had this tool called Apply Smart in the past, and it's a little outdated now. The data was collected through 2018, and it was based on USMLE Step 1 scores. And as we know, lots of things have changed since 2018, as well as many DO students didn't have USMLE Step 1 scores to be considered in that process. And so maybe it wasn't quite representative of DO seniors. And now Step 1 is pass-fail. So that tool is a little bit outdated, but back then it said that the data showed for DO students entering into pediatrics that the point of diminishing return for applications was 16 to 22 programs. The APPD, the pediatric program directors, are recommending that that most students do not need to apply to more than 20 programs unless there's some underlying academic difficulty, those in couples match, or if your pediatric medical school leadership is suggesting that you are applying to more than 20. We really want to make sure that programs can do the holistic review that we want to do and get in depth into your applications. And it's hard for programs to do if we're flooded by applications. So as far as factors into deciding which of those up to 20 programs to apply to, I think first of all, you really just need to know yourself. What excites you about pediatrics? What's your learning style? What has really enriched your clinical growth over the last couple of years? What are your career goals? What's important for you in a program? Is it something that's close to home? Are you looking for a large program or a small program? Are you looking for an urban or a suburban or a mixed kind of environment to train? Do you have any special interests or tracks that you would be really interested in? And I can say that there's no right answer or a perfect program, but I want you to consider what would be good for you. And then also in saying this, I want to encourage you to keep an open mind in choosing programs to apply to. You might find the right program for you where you least expect it. You might find new passions and new experiences along the way that lead you into a different direction or right where you're supposed to be. So I would encourage you to start exploring residency programs now. There's a lot of tools out there like the Residency Explorer or Frida that can help you begin that search. But then utilize those links and start looking into their websites and their social media accounts for a better idea of their mission and goals and their culture. I do caution you against getting swept up in shiny marketing, but look for those important things. Those things are important to you. And then engage with programs through the webinars, through FuturePedsRes residents, through residency fairs, through your school, through the region and different organizations, and reach out to alumni or anybody that you might know if you have questions about those programs as well.
Thank you. That was really helpful. Can we go on to our third question? All right, so this question is for Dr. Lewis. How are COMLEX scores viewed in comparison to STEP scores? And which exam STEP level 1 versus 2 is more important?
So I think they're all just tests. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. They are all just one measure of who you are as a medical student and who you are as a physician. The reality of life is that as doctors, we keep having to take tests. They like never go away, but we all really feel like it is just one part of who you are. I'll tell you, so I am the one MD physician on the panel, but my program is full of a lot of DOs. My primary care physician is a DO. So I sought that on purpose. I only looked for a DO to be my PCP. But I think that they are just a test. So I don't look at COMLEX scores different than I look at USMLE scores. And I would say that right now, I mean, what we look at, my program has been looking at your level 1 or step 1 as pass fail for like 4 years. And if you failed, then we looked at maybe why you failed and if you passed later. So I think we are all trying to look at things. And I know this like holistic review is a trendy term, right? But it is the real deal. Like we really are trying to look at who you are. And so these test scores are just really a part of who you are. And I think by default, we're gonna have some value on the level 2 and step 2 a little bit more than step 1 and level 1, but it still is really like a small part of the story of who you are. So I think that's important. You know, the APPD recommendation also is that programs do not wait for a step 2 or level 2 prior to deciding interviews. In our program, we never do that, but I'll tell you, just for you to know, we need it before we rank you, because you need it to graduate med school. And I would like to know that you're going to graduate medical school before I put you on my list. But so that means, like, by February, I need to know what your level 2 or your step 2 is. I also think, I'll tell you, none of the DOs in my program take USMLE step 3. They all take COMLEX level 3. So I just think we look at them as just a piece of the puzzle, and they are just another test. I would say too, I mean, I know this didn't come up as a question, but I feel like sometimes there's this undertone, not from you guys at all, please, I want to be clear that I'm saying that for some reason DOs should like spend their time trying to pretend they're not DOs. And like, what can we do to like show that we're just like the MDs? And I just think you should just be who you are, because who you are is wonderful. And you bring a really important skill set, and you bring, every person brings their own skill set. So some of this whole idea about USMLE was like, oh, how do I make myself seem like the other people? And I just personally view that as unnecessary. I think you guys are all great the way that you are.
Thanks, Dr. Lewis.
May I jump in on that one? Because Dr. Lewis hit the nail on the head on several different facts that I'm like applauding. I'm just like, my heart is racing. And
You'll see Dr. Winters and I were like a little love fest here, so excuse us.
we
Yeah.
like, such the homie. But what I was going to say is the other thing that I really think that needs to be said, and I've noticed this trend for so long, most of my career has been, it seems as if we tend to really pay much stock into what other students who are going through the same process that we're going through is saying, and completely disavow what the program directors are saying. And it's like, I've literally had, and I was been shocked multiple times. I literally had DOs come to me as a DO and say, do you take DOs in your program? And I just look at them just with bewilderment, like, really? Do you think I'm gonna not take a DO in my program and I'm a DO? Like, have we met? Does it make sense? But unfortunately, there is a lot of sometimes mis and disinformation that are out there. Complete transparency. Yes, there are still some folks who are not as forward thinking and still have a whatever biases that they may have against DOs. That's completely true. That is completely out there. I will not sit here and tell you that's not true. However, what I will tell you is that really when we talk to you about what the Association of Pediatric Program Directors, which are all the pediatric program directors, all 210 of us in the country, get together and we talk about these things, this is the general consensus. We are really telling you that we do look at COMLEX scores the same that we're looking at USMLE. We're not asking you or comparing you or saying like you have to take this, because at the end of the day, when you look at COCA requirements, you look at the AOA requirements, it is COMLEX you need to graduate. Similar to what Dr. Lewis said in terms of your COMLEX 3. You don't need to finish out a USMLE 3, but you do need to finish out a COMLEX 3 in order to have a medical license from whichever state. That's why it's so imperative that I don't want our students to feel as if they have to be charged double to be able to go into any residency program, because you have to take COMLEX. You do not have to take USMLE. But I just want to make sure that I did say that, like, please listen to us. We're really telling you the God honest truth. And sometimes when you see that mis and disinformation out there, really take that with a grain of salt, because it can really impede on people's progress and what they really want to see within applying to a program or going to a program that they really like, but they're really scared because their friend may have said, like, oh, I heard they don't take DOs.
Thanks, Dr. Winters and Dr. Lewis. That was really valuable advice. So I can move on to our question 4. This is also for Dr. Lewis. What is the best piece of advice you have for an osteopathic applicant?
Everything's going to be fine. I don't know. I think that's my best piece of advice. Everything's going to be fine. There are, like when you meet pediatric program directors and people from APPD, I mean, we all just love each other. Like everybody thinks everyone's program's wonderful. There is everything we can learn from so many different places. All the places are running wonderful pediatric programs. And we are all offer something a little bit different for different types of people. So I don't, this is a time right now, like it is only June. Okay. So like my interns, I was just saying, my interns are actually in my backyard right now, having pizza, eating some ice cream. It's like 95 degrees. So we got them like little kid popsicles. But it's a year from now that you'll be in that situation. So think about what's important to you and think about what kind of place might be right for you, because the people I really want to come to me are the people that are interested in what we're offering. And so thinking, I think reflecting on what you want, and trying to find different ways to do it. I think the social media part is very tricky. Not everybody has the bandwidth to be running like an amazing Twitter account and an amazing Instagram account. And so please don't fault a program that does not have a big social media presence. The other reality is like nobody puts their worst day on Instagram, right? So, and that's in the reality of life too. So everybody's gonna show you all of their best selves, but reaching out to other people and seeing their experiences are what's gonna give you the best advice. So I just think, but at the end of the day, like it is all gonna be great. There is a great program for everyone. There's probably 5 great programs for everyone.
Thanks, Dr. Lewis. So this wraps up our questions, but now we would like to open the floor to any questions that we have from Zoom and Twitter. So here is one of the questions that we have from Zoom. For those who have taken both Step 1 and COMLEX 1 and have a score discrepancy, how do you view that? For example, a high COMLEX but a low Step 1 or vice versa.
So I'll say for us, we 100%, we really don't look at your Step 1 score. Like, I don't know how else to be clear about that. But when we look at your Step 2, everybody has some sort of algorithm and they're calculating and they're looking at something, we just look at whichever one's better. It's like, I just figure if there's one day that you did better than the other, I'm going to believe that that's like what's in you and that's what you know how to do. So that's the way that we do it.
Awesome.
I echo Joanna, same here. We don't, again, step 1, did you pass? And then if there is score discrepancy, I mean, as DO program, we were looking at COMLEX more, but we know that sometimes test days are good and some test days are bad. And so we like to see what you're capable of.
Yeah, for us, we really pay more attention to, very similar to our scores. We don't really look at scores more so than pass or fail. We really look at what has been said about you from like your clerkships, right? So when you're clerkship directors, and we all have like the medical student performance evaluation, the MSPE, where you literally can get a gauge of how is this person, because let's face it, there are some physicians that are out there that are geniuses when it comes to taking a test that I probably wouldn't trust taking care of my child. But then there are others who may have had difficulty with taking tests that, I mean, I would trust them hands down with my life, my child's life, anyone's life. So I don't think a test defines you at all. I definitely know that even if there is a situation where it's a large discrepancy, or there is a point where you feel like, oh, this is what happened, an explanation for whatever have you, I think it's nothing wrong with being able to say like, hey, this is what had happened, what went on, but I don't think that it's something that you really need to harp on or feel like it's do or die, that if you didn't express what had happened, that it's going to be the end of your chances.
Thanks, Dr. Winters. So here's another question. Do you recommend signaling programs that we didn't away at? And if so, or if not, how should we go about signaling?
Who knows? So we're all trying to figure this out, right? I mean, we have a lot of people that are putting their heads together to think about this. I would say that the program where you're doing that might be able to give you some better advice. I don't know. I mean, April can speak more to what like the recommendations are, but I think that if a program tells you like, we already interview, let's say a program says, we're going to interview everybody that rotates here. You don't need to use a signal on us, then I would believe them. Like no one's going to lie to you. But we have not come out and said that like as a group that you should not signal away rotations. Did I get that right, April?
Yeah, so on the official recommendation that came out, the letter that went to programs and you as applicants can also review is you should check with your home program to see like if you were planning to stay and your program has a residency, check with them to see if they want you to signal, just to make sure. And then for aways, it does say to signal aways, but I completely agree with Dr. Lewis that if they say not to, then don't bother your signal there. I mean, I think the idea of including aways is in case you're still not as interested and you did your away early, you really get to signal where you are most interested. And if you do your away later, you may need to signal them because they haven't had a chance to tell you not to. So I think that's just the difficult place. And so that's how the recommendations landed. And it really was a AAMC ERIS recommendation. So it's universal. This is not just pediatrics, but they're telling all the places, unless the societies are coming out and saying something different, to signal them unless you're explicitly told otherwise.
I would also say as well, when you're thinking about your home institution, as we know, most osteopathic schools typically don't have a pediatric residency program that necessarily may be attached. You may have an affiliate program. So for my program, for instance, Rowan University School of Osteopathic Medicine is an affiliate program with us. So because of that, if we know that we have someone that's coming from Rowan, we normally would, how we plan on doing it is by saying like, hey, if you let us know, then save your signaling in the sense of like, hey, if we see, not necessarily us, you have to call us and let us know. It's like if we see Rowan, we're just automatically will consider them as being like part of our home institution, if that makes sense. But the reason why I say let us know is because if you're ever confused about like, hey, was this something that you were planning on doing as a general overall statement, very similar to Dr. Buchanan has said, that's what I mean by that. But you don't have to necessarily reach out or call us or call any other programs if you already know if there's a statement, and most of those programs are going to probably put statements out there.
Thank you. Another question that we have is, should I apply to a program I'm interested in, even if it does not have a single DO resident?
I will say yes, if you think that's a program that is the right fit for you and it's something that you're really interested in, then you should absolutely apply.
There is no way you can match there if you don't apply there, right? That's sort of what I would think.
I think one thing too is there are changes in program leadership over time. So sometimes you might look at trends and not have seen DOs and suddenly see DOs, or it would be true even of international medical grads or where students come from. And so I think that, you just never know. And sometimes there's also just a change in people if they've had any biases in the past. And so I would say, yeah, absolutely. If you're interested, apply, because you might be their first DO resident, and I think that's a great opportunity to open people's eyes sometimes when they've been closed or not been very thoughtful in the process. So.
Thank you. Another question that we have is, should we reach out to program directors if we are really interested in the program before or after interviews? Or should we contact the program coordinator?
Are they asking if it should be the program director or the program coordinator when they reach out? Or do you think the question is, should people reach out at all?
should people reach out at all to the program director, especially to express interest before an interview, if they want an interview, or after?
So this year you have a signal to show that you have interest for an interview, right? So that should really decrease your feeling of a need to reach out to a program, because for your 5 programs that you want, you are able to signal them. I am a firm believer, I talked about this on Monday, that there's really not a need for any post-interview communication, really on the part of the program director or the applicant, unless you have a question that you need clarification, that it's helping you to understand, like, oh, I didn't understand this on my interview day, or, oh, I have a young child. Can you connect me with a resident in your program that has a young child? Or I have to care for my parents. Can you connect me with someone in your program that is caring for their parents to see how that feels? But other than that, these like love letters and stuff like that, to me, they stress you out. I don't think they make a difference. And that's my personal feeling, is that I don't find post-interview communication to be necessary.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. So our next question is actually for Dr. Bodie. Dr. Bodie mentioned to not be swayed by flashy social media or more superficial things like that. What are some red flags that applicants should look out for when applying, especially as DO applicants?
I don't know about red flags. I was just saying, I want you to look for the meat in the content and in their website, and what is their mission, and what are those things that the residents are doing that you can see yourself doing, rather than do they have the best graphics, or do they post every day or every week.
And a related question to that is, other than location, what do you recommend we look for in programs, and what can help us narrow down our list?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Yes. So a related question was, other than location, what do you recommend we look for in programs, and what can help us narrow down our list?
You know, this is an interesting question because I get this quite a bit. Very similar to when you are either applying, or when, say, for instance, my residents are applying for fellowship or they're applying for jobs. You'll be surprised that you don't know what you like until, or don't like until sometimes you get there. So for instance, a lot of times people will say, oh, I really want to go to a place that don't have a lot of fellows because I really want that one-on-one relationship with the attending. And then you may find out that, you know, working with fellows, as somebody who trained in a place that had gazillions of fellows, I actually loved working with my fellows, but I also now am a program director at a place that only has one fellowship program, and I can see the benefits of that as well. I think it's just one of those things where you can, of course, get a chance to say, like, you know, I really know that I don't want to be in a huge program. I really want to be in a smaller program, or I really want to be in a place that has a freestanding children's hospital, or a place that doesn't have one. All of those type of things can matter to folks, but it's very hard to determine whether or not it's something that you will like until you kind of get in there. What I will say it's usually helpful to look for is to see, are not only the residents, but the faculty happy? Do they really want to be there? And I think happiness can always be very tricky, because you can catch somebody on the right day, usually on the winter, during RSV season, and I'll tell you, don't talk to anybody. Don't talk to even the environmental service person, because it's just the peds wintertime. However, seriously look and see overall, can someone ask the question, yes, I would come back here and do my residency program again. Yes, I would come back here and be a faculty member here again. That's usually a general overall question, where even when you look at the sum of good and bad days, my good days outweigh my bad.
Thanks, Dr. Winters. That's a really good perspective. Another question that we have is, do you have any advice for interview day? What are some factors or ways that applicants can stand out to you during interviews, especially with the season being conducted virtually?
So one thing I would say is that virtual is now normal for us. So, I mean, almost all of our residents that are going to be in our programs have, you know, interviewed. A lot of them have interviewed virtually. So we're very, oh, the party is loud downstairs. Hold on, I'm closing the door. So this means they're having a good time. So we all are very used to virtual interviewing. And I would say that personally, I have found it to be really great. I think it is less expensive. I think we still get to have these really nice conversations. I find sometimes actually the conversation's a little bit easier because you don't have like, you meet them in one room and you have this like awkward walking down the hall where sometimes someone interrupts you and then like you don't know where the bathroom is and you're in an uncomfortable chair. Like we're all like in the right temperature, in our slippers and our sweatpants, right on the bottom. That's like the reality. So we can be a little bit more comfortable. But I think this actually goes back to what Dr. Winters was just answering about like, what should we look for in a program? And this is not me trying to not answer the question, but only you can answer what you are looking for in a program. So what might be the best thing for my med school classmate is not the best thing for me. So when you are coming to an interview, you really should have questions. The biggest thing to me is if someone has no questions. I'm like, how can you have no questions? Like, you have to have some sort of question. And if me and Laura and Ty were all interviewing you and you asked us all the same question, we would never know that you asked us all the same question. And it might be helpful to you to hear how each of us answers that question. So I think having some questions in your back pocket and having done your homework, like, please don't ask me like a basic thing that's on my website that you could have looked at, because that is not a good use of our time. Like when you actually get me for 15 or 20 minutes, you want to ask me like the big questions, the things that are important to you. And so I've taken the time to look through stuff. You don't have to memorize my website, but you should know some things about the program.
Thanks, Dr. Lewis. So actually another question for Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis mentioned being kind when taking program social media presence into account. How do an applicant's social media presence play into applications potential offers for interviews?
I promise you I have no time in my life to look for applicants on social media. I don't know if other people do, but like we already have what, like 1,200 applications to review. I just don't have the time. I don't know what you guys think.
I promise you I don't have the time. I will tell you it's quite interesting. It's not a secret that I am quite active on Twitter. And because of that, I have been shocked at how many times I've had someone tell me during an interview, this past season, like, oh, I interviewed at your program because I follow you on Twitter and I really liked you on Twitter, or oh, I know you from Twitter and blah, 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 blah. And that, even though it's very flattering, it's also very jarring because it's just like, whoa. The reason why I bring that up is because that makes me think to myself, like, what happened if I was to say that to someone during the interview trail? Like, oh, I looked you up on Twitter, or I looked you up on Instagram, and oh, you had fun in Punta Cana or whatever have you. That would be very awkward. So because of that, I realized, and I had this conversation with all of my faculty, that we're like, yeah, let's just avoid any of those conversations or those type of things. Because if we're going to do it for one person, we have to do it for everyone. So like Dr. Lewis said, we have to do it for all literally 1,200 people that you're interviewing with. That would be only the best policy. And then also on top of that, it's just can kind of be very awkward. So even if you're thinking about doing it because you're like, oh, I really want you to know that I'm interested in you as a candidate, it just makes it kind of awkward, right?
Thanks, Dr. Winters. Let's see. Another question that we have is, I don't know if you already answered this question, but how do I go about obtaining an away or audition elective if my school is not LCME accredited and not able to do FRIDA?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. So the question is, how do I go about obtaining an away or audition elective if my school is not LCME accredited and not able to do FRIDA?
I think if you are, I don't know, if you are still interested in a program for the experience, just to be in the program and not for an audition, that you could reach out to them. I don't know what the programs policies are on that. But as program directors, we don't expect that you're able to do a rotation at every program that you're interested in, and we don't want you to waste your resources doing that either. And so, again, you don't have to have a rotation with those top 5 programs to be considered a very strong applicant.
Yeah, I would just add to reach out to the program and just ask kind of what are their regulations around being able to apply, and do you have an opportunity if you're especially interested, but completely agree that that is by no means a requirement at all.
All right, we have one more question. What is the perspective on letter recommendations from a DO versus MD letter writers?
I don't think it matters what the letters are after that physician's name and a letter recommendation, as long as the letter is personal and a strong recommendation for you. I don't think it should matter if it's a DO or an MD.
But I just want to say one thing. I agree 100%, but I do think it's important that they are a physician most of the time. But I would say if you worked with like an NP in a busy outpatient clinic for a long time and they can write a good letter for you, that's important too. But a lot of people ask us, like, what about someone I did research with, or what about someone who, I don't know, did other experiences with? I think for this situation, it's important. We want to know that someone can tell us about like your communication style as a medical student, how you are developing a differential, how you've grown, all these different aspects. And so we get asked a lot about like what types of letters are good letters, but not only do I not really care if it's an MD or DO after their name, I also don't care actually what their name is. So like, I'm not wooed by like someone from, or where they are, like what hospital system they're with or what university. It is what Dr. Buchanan said, someone who knows you well, that is your best letter. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps up all our questions for tonight. Thank you so much, Dr. Bodie, Dr. Winters, and Dr. Lewis for all this valuable information. It was super helpful, and we're very thankful for you all taking the time out of your day to speak to us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Wonderful. Thank you to Kirti and Sabina and the whole webinars team and everybody who showed up. We're just so grateful to have the support of all our panelists and the APPD and COMCEP. It's like a love fest, and I feel like as students we can feel it already. So we appreciate you. And thank you to everyone who asked questions and came tonight. We really appreciate you. Please keep in touch. Once again, we hope that you were all able to get something important and useful out of this session today. And as application and interview season gets into full swing, we'll remind you yet again that we'll be having a bunch more webinars. So we have our IMG webinar on Monday, June 27th, and then a bunch of regional webinars, which are going to be amazing and a lot more intimate interactions with the programs and program directors in the different regions around the country. And those will be happening throughout the remainder of August and September. And you can register by visiting our website at FuturePedsRes.com, clicking on webinar series registration, which makes intuitive sense, luckily. And yeah, so stay tuned, keep in touch with us on social media. And with that said, we just want to wish everyone an excellent remainder of the evening, and we look forward to seeing you at the rest of our webinars. Thank you, everyone.